Welcome back to Viva La Coin. Make sure your helmet's on and buckle up because we are about to take a crash course in blockchain and exactly what that concept is and how it propels the entire cryptocurrency space in its current function through and through, whether that's Bitcoin or any of the alternative coins that you may be familiar with. Now, going through this information, it tends to be very, very overwhelming. So I'm just going to give you a base overview. We're not software engineers. I don't expect you to go and write your own blockchain code after we get off of this. But the concept behind it is very interesting and it's pivotal to this space. And the way I view it, if you're going to invest your money or put your time into a certain asset or into a certain space, you want to know how it operates, especially this early on. You want to understand it. So if this video by the end helps you to have a better understanding of blockchain and how it operates, make sure just to share it to anyone else you know that's interested in this space so that they can get an overview of what blockchain is. So the number one thing I want to clarify, Bitcoin and blockchain are not necessarily one and the same. Most people have a misconception that Bitcoin is blockchain, and it's not. Bitcoin was a byproduct of the first ever blockchain that was created, but the two are separate in nature. There are several other blockchains, just like there are several other cryptocurrencies. Think about it like this. I have my phone and I have the Uber app on my phone. If I want to call an Uber, I can open up that application, but it's my phone and the software and hardware behind it that actually allows that interaction to take place. So think about blockchain like the application or the platform for then Bitcoin or any of these other cryptocurrencies to exist upon as we build on it. Now, a little history as to why blockchain was invented. Back in 2008, one thing we're all familiar with is we suffered a pretty devastating crash in the housing market where there were a ton of corrupt and misreported or misaligned loans and payments that almost collapsed the entire global economy. At that point, no one was really held responsible. Almost everyone got bailed out, and the regulations that should have changed did not change the capacity in which they needed to. And there were plenty of smart people underground that were working on different projects that decided this isn't right. We need a way to get outside of the US dollar. We needed to be able to generate our own payment system or our own form of currency because this one is obviously corrupted or manipulated to the point where we're not going to be able to separate ourselves from whatever damages will come from the choices that are made from the top. Now, along comes Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi Nakamoto was the pseudonym chosen by the individual that developed and invented blockchain and created the Bitcoin blockchain. We believe it's a single person. It could be multiple people. We don't know. But they're completely anonymous. But in 2008, they put out a white paper, which is essentially just a proof of work or publishing their idea for people to see. And this is what was published in 2008. So you should be able to see here a Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And the idea of this paper and the idea of blockchain in general was to be able to create a system where I can send transactions or I can trade assets or wealth with individuals without having to use a middleman, without having to go back and forth, and one that couldn't be corrupted by someone in between. So in the design of this blockchain, it was important that if there was a ledger attached to it, just like if you had a database of transactions that you created on your debit card. If you're swiping your debit card, you see the transactions and everything that you do. Well, now on this blockchain, every transaction is public. Everything that has ever occurred on the Bitcoin blockchain is on that public ledger all the way back to the initial block that was sent. And in this case, that's the block I'm going to focus on when we talk about the concept of how it works in the beginning. So Satoshi Nakamoto sent a transaction in the first blockchain block on the Bitcoin blockchain to a man named Hal Finney. And in order to get that transaction to go through without using a middleman, without having a bank move the money, there was a computer interface or a computer node that would solve an equation or an algorithm. And as that computer solved that algorithm, upon completion and verification, it pushed that transaction through. And the byproduct of solving that equation, or the incentive of that node to complete it, was Bitcoin. In that first transaction, once it verified, he sent that transaction over to Hal Finney. It produced 50 Bitcoin. And every transaction after that produced 50 more Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. Now, as more people began to transact with this system, let's say that Hal Finney then sent it to someone else and they sent it to someone else. Now there are more computers that are a part of this blockchain. So part of Satoshi's goal here was to make the network infallible. So you couldn't really change it, you couldn't corrupt it, you couldn't break it. It was always correct and public for everyone. So in order to do that, the more computers that were added to that network, they would all start solving those equations. And the more computers that were putting their power behind that blockchain made it more and more difficult to attack. Now, the first computer that solves the equation, let's say if there's 500,000 computers now in the network, they're all racing to solve that next block, that next transaction that may include a series of different payments and transactions upon it that it's waiting to push through. The first computer to solve that hashing equation, they receive the Bitcoin. That is the incentive to drive that through. But once they solve it, all the other computers receive the answer to that equation. And if the maximum or the majority amount of the computers verify that that is correct, then that transaction is pushed through. The Bitcoin is generated for the individual, and then whoever I sent that transaction to, they now received their Bitcoin or their cryptocurrency. So in order for me, let's say I was trying to do some really reckless activity and crash Bitcoin, or go back and edit or alter something on the public ledger. So now, in order for me to do that, I would have to access more than 50%. So the majority of the network would have to be a part of that attack. And with as large as Bitcoin has grown, and as it continues to grow, the more computers and individuals added onto this network, the stronger it becomes, because it takes more and more computational effort for anyone to try and break into it. And although it seems very volatile in its price now on the Bitcoin blockchain, it's actually far more secure currently than it was in the early days of Bitcoin, just due to the total volume of the network and how many people are involved. Now, the Bitcoin that's being produced, I'm going to go into that in our What is Bitcoin video, because it operates a little bit differently in how that is generated and the amount that is generated over time. But ultimately, that is how you create a trustless system. Now, that is key for a couple reasons. When you go back to 2008 and you wonder, how did this happen? How could have no one known that everything was going to collapse? Well, when you have a centralized system where only a few people control that data, only a few people can actually see it or edit it, then it doesn't take much for them to either go in and alter something or to corrupt the system. And even externally from those organizations, if you have just one central hub, you can also face external attack from hackers or other people that may want that data in a much easier way than trying to attack the entirety of the Bitcoin blockchain. So you eliminate the trust of that third party. You eliminate having to rely on them to either preserve the amount that you're giving them, to not take a bunch of fees, or to take a bunch of, additional money out than what is supposed to be, and then to deliver that money on time. Well, now it's a trustless system, so it's not based on trust, it's based on cryptography. And cryptography isn't here to manipulate your numbers. So as that's proven, it keeps pushing that information through, securing the network and strengthening that network. So I hope that having an idea of what blockchain is separately from Bitcoin gives you a better idea as to why that technology in general is important. Now, there is another layer to this, and that comes a couple years past Bitcoin's inception with Ethereum. So up until that point, there were a few other cryptocurrencies. People were trying to make different blockchains. None as successful as Bitcoin due to the nature of it, which we'll cover. But on the Ethereum blockchain, it was the first time where you can actually build applications on those blocks. So when you talk about Ethereum and why it's important for that blockchain, well, it's because that Ethereum network, that is the blockchain, and the Ethereum token that you see everyone paying for that's pushing towards $2,000, that is just the token or the currency that you have to burn or spend in order to transact or to build upon that blockchain. Whether you're building a website, an application, a business, anything at all, you can build on that blockchain. Just as if I were to build a website in Google, the only difference is now I have that network of computers verifying my information and pushing my payments or my platforms through in the way that they should be. And let's say if someone didn't want me to have my website up, or they didn't like what I was saying, or you have countries all over the world where certain leaders or certain dictators would stop their population from communicating or from creating or from innovating. Well, now they can't do that because they can't access every computer on Earth simultaneously to shut that down. And that's another benefit of blockchain, is it is immutable. You cannot silence it, you cannot stop it. So even if the United States went off the deep end and they were like, we don't want to progress like the rest of the world, let's just ban cryptocurrency. Well, you can't. Like, we would still be able to purchase it, and then you can just go somewhere else, anywhere in the world, and that value still remains the same because it is a global network all agreeing that that one item or that one crypto, whichever one it is worth a certain value. So it has so many benefits in how it operates. And that invention is what has allowed this space to develop in the way that it has. One last thing I'll show you before we go here is the original block that was sent is still on the blockchain. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read this or know what it says because, to be honest with you, I don't either. I didn't program it, and I'm not going to pretend like I know what every single little piece of that is. But the fact that the blockchain is so dynamic that every transaction years and years later are still contained within it in a public and historical ledger that can't be edited, that you can't destroy, is pretty incredible in my opinion. And I hope that this technology continues to develop and it gives us opportunities to create and to build wealth and to innovate all over the world in a way that most people were unable to because they had to access certain levels of funds or get over certain barriers or avoid certain regulations put in place to stifle them in their current country or in their current situations. But I hope that you found this video informational. Apart from, I could just tell you blockchain is Bitcoin, it's what it runs on. But it's nice to know a little bit of the more in-depth information. So when you're purchasing it, you can say, okay, I understand a little bit more what I'm purchasing. It's not just a Bitcoin, a digital line of code. This blockchain is a public general ledger of every transaction that occurs around the world simultaneously. And that is a very valuable thing to own or to be a part of. So if you can share this, like the video, I hope that this clarified some information, and we're going to get deep into what Bitcoin is and where that value in that cryptocurrency specifically comes from. Because most people say, well, you have 8,000 other cryptocurrencies. Why is Bitcoin the winner? Why is that one so expensive? So we're going to cover that in the next video. And any additional questions, leave it in the comments down below. And I appreciated spending this time with you. Aside from that, Viva La Coin.